Boy, we should probably get Davey to rate this one too. I don't know, Davey. That might be more like roast it instead of rate it, but I'd be interested to hear what he has to say with that one. I know it's pretty advanced, but maybe Davey be able to get to that one someday. We're gonna tie now a mustard waltz. Huzzah! Here it is. I don't know. Thing's got a life of its own. So, years ago, mid to late 90s, me and a friend had a mix of dubbing that we used as sulfur emerger dubbing. And it had all sorts of different materials in it. I don't remember, we had stuff that was dyed in there. I think we had muskrat. I think we had mink that we'd shaved off of carcasses ourselves. I don't even remember what else was in there. We had a big bag of it. And we used to put it out as kind of like gills out of a brown sulfur nymph and fished it as a sulfur emerger. And it was all fine and dandy, had it like that for a while. I was fishing one day in June down on Penns, and alder flies were coming off. They weren't taking the adults all that much, but they were flashing. I could see them flashing, and I caught a few fish, but I'm like, I need to tie something that mimics an alder fly. Well, if you look at an alder fly, it's a little Helgramite-ish. They're in the same order. A little Helgramite type nymph. It's about that long, real thin, orangish yellow. I went rooting around in my stuff. I had that Ziploc bag of sulfur dubbing. I want to try this. Took a couple, tied a thin Walt's wormish style fly, and I think I tied something else that was a little more probably ugly. Took it out the next day and whacked him on that thin Walt's wormish style, and then from there I used it on Penns a bunch. I used it sparingly here and there. Then I started competing, used it in some places, and it started to work. People would ask about it. They couldn't get in anywhere. I was the only one that had it. So I was like, wow, this is an advantage. I used it more, and I always tied it thin, cigar shaped like that, because that's the way I always tied my waltz worms. It's not really a waltz worm. It's not the right color, it's not the right shape, it's none of that. It was what I got the idea of tying that way from Walt Young's original waltz worm, so I just always called it a waltz worm. But I think there's a lot of people out there that don't really know what a real waltz worm looks like. It's quite a bit bushier, quite a bit lighter, and it's kind of like a different animal, but it's what I got the idea to tie a long thin fly versus the muskrats and sow bugs that we used to fish in the 90s on Spring Creek. There was a lot more sow bugs than there are now. Now there's more scuds. There's not even as many of those, but there was more sow bugs than anything, so most everything we tied was in a round shape. Muskrat was basically a football shaped ball of dubbing, of muskrat dubbing, and I would tie thin ones out of muskrat dubbing or rabbit dubbing, and I just called it a waltz worm. So that's why it is the shape that it is, and that's why it is the color that it is. But after, I don't know, 7-8 years of competing, I ran through all of the dubbing that I had, and I could never duplicate it. I tried. I still don't write anything down when I'm mixing up dubbing, so I've got no chance to get any better at it. But I tried several times, got kind of close, but it just never was the same. When I started to get with Fulling Mill to do tying, they asked me about it, and I was like, I can't really duplicate it. And those guys said, well, let's take a stab at it. We did a bunch of different materials and tests, and there's been several different iterations of it, but now this is the closest one that we have. It's closer than I was able to come up with, but that's the true story behind the story. I don't even know why it's a story, but I'm told that it's a story, and I hear things that are weird about it that I don't know, that don't make much sense to me, but that's how it came about. So Fulling Mill made the dubbing, so now I can just buy it. I don't have to try to make it myself. It's a lot easier that way. Tie it. It's real simple. This is a big one. I usually tie them pretty small, but I make this one big just for the sake of looking at it. A lot of times I would run lead through half of that shank, partially because I started tying these before I even knew what tungsten was, and most of them didn't have a bead on it at all, and if they did, it was a brass bead. So I always had some lead in there. So one, it helped with the weight. Two, I didn't have to use as much dubbing because I only had so much of that dubbing left. So I'd rather cover the shank with lead and not have to use as much dubbing. Now I can get all sorts of dubbing from Fulling Mill, so we're just going to tie it without any lead. There's nothing fancy to this. You can rib this a bunch of different ways. You can take this thread, run it back through the dubbing, run it back through again, or you can use some fluorocarbon. That's kind of the way that I originally started doing it, so we'll just bind a little fluorocarbon in there. 3, 4, 5X, whatever you like. Color of the thread, doesn't matter. I tie it relatively, I don't dub it terribly tight, so it's kind of bushy, but then I'll trim it up, which seems counterintuitive, but that's just the way I always did it. The only real trick to it is just to have it be thin, getting a little bit thicker at the end. And if you make a wrap or two of the dubbing behind your ribbing, keeps it from breaking and lasts a little bit longer. That's about it. Counter ribbit. I like to put a lot of wraps in there. Gives it kind of a segmentation, but it just keeps it from really coming undone after you get a few fish on it and really getting too fluffy. Find a pretty good thread head on there. Not crazy. Take off the excess. That's it. Full send. Boy, we should probably get Davey to rate this one too. I don't know, Davey. That might be more like roast it instead of rate it, but I'd be interested to hear what he has to say with that one. I know it's pretty advanced, but maybe Davey be able to get to that one someday.